Welcome to The Disappearing Mind, a unique podcast helping you find clarity and support along your dementia journey. Now, join National Dementia Trainer and Coach Dawn Platt for an all-new episode.
Hello and welcome to the podcast. This is your host, Dawn Platt. Thank you for joining me today on The Disappearing Mind. We're going to continue in our series, The Dementia Journey, the 4 Stages of Understanding. In this series, we're going through the Dementia Journey Map. And as I have said before, this process, this journey is different. It's individualized for different people, depending on who you are, how you're impacted by dementia. Is it a friend, an acquaintance at work, or is it a loved one that's being diagnosed? Perhaps it's you. Perhaps that you're in the early stages of mild cognitive impairment, or you have a full-blown dementia diagnosis. This process of understanding really helps us walk through each stage and how we deal with that. In the 4 stages of understanding, we understand that this greatly varies from person to person, okay? That the frustration that you might be experiencing can run high, especially in families or through yourself, that you're not really understanding what's happening with you or a loved one. Depression can be common because we're dealing with something that is new to us, that we don't have the full understanding and perhaps don't even have a diagnosis for. Support is going to be key. And I've talked about this a lot. Support is different for each one of us. Perhaps it's listening to the podcast, and I hope you do. I hope you share the podcast because the information that we put out, we try and gear our podcast to our listener, to where you're at and what your needs are. Support can be through a professional support group, such as one provided in your local community by the Alzheimer's Association or your local hospital, a memory care clinic. Support can also be friends and family. Perhaps support is professional counseling to you or through your church. Support is important so that you have a place to have a conversation, to vent, or even to ask questions. It's very important to know and understand that you're not alone on this journey, that others have walked the journey, and perhaps from their experience, they have learned things that will be helpful to you. So I just encourage you to make sure that you're having these conversations. Resources and information come in a variety of ways. I hope that you will use the podcast as a resource, your physician, your local hospital or memory care clinic as a resource. Certainly online resources first. I would recommend the Alzheimer's Association website for a variety of resources, but there are other resources through the Mayo Clinic, through Harvard. There are lots of resources available. Oftentimes, the frustration that I hear from individuals is that they have questions that are a little bit more personal. They're kind of what if. They're a little frightened about the journey. They don't understand the process of the actual disease stages and maybe where they are, their loved one is. And that is where I do really recommend diagnosis and really getting some advice from your healthcare provider, your neurologist, to be able to determine not only the type of dementia that you're dealing with, but what stage is the individual in. Lots of good resources available for you to understand the stages of the actual disease. Today, we're talking about the stages of understanding, which is a little bit different. And we do understand that this can be frightening. What we don't understand can be frightening for us, and taking it one day at a time, one breath at a time, is going to be really important. And reaching out and being a part of a larger community, even if that's a Facebook support group, is going to be very important. Understand, though, please, that your journey can be unique. We don't want to assume that everyone's journey is the same. It simply isn't that way. So let's talk about the 4 stages of understanding in this segment, stage 2. So we want to talk about this stage. This is I'm worried about. I am worried about. In stage 2, we talk about living well with dementia. In living well with dementia, there are a number of things that we talk about. We talk about legal matters. We talk about making sure that our finances are in order, that our will is in order, that our healthcare surrogate is in order. We want to do the planning and preparation necessary for if and when the diagnosis is there and what the future might bring. And I understand as a daughter or even a daughter-in-law, it can be something that maybe you're not used to doing. Maybe you are not been involved with your parents or even your spouse. But planning and preparation are really key. And getting legal matters in order is going to be hugely beneficial, and to do that early. So there are a number of things you want to consider. And at this point, I'm worried about it. This is when you want to look at your options. Get your resources, do your exploration, get the information in hand so you know what is available, what the options are, not only for the diagnosis, but in the area where you live. Resources can vary from state to state and definitely from city to city. So let's talk about I'm worried about it, living well. Living well really is something we've talked about. I think that oftentimes when people are considering the diagnosis or they feel like there's a diagnosis, there's really some doom and gloom that comes along with it. And we need to understand that dementia, whether it's Alzheimer's disease or related dementias, is a process. It has several phases and stages to it, and they're different for each type of dementia that we see. So living your best life with dementia means getting the education and resources available, but living life. There can be years in between suspicion, diagnosis, and death. It is a long period. Alzheimer's disease is called the long goodbye. So there are many years in between that we need to live our best life. Whatever that looks like, it's really key and important, something you need to think about. Living in the moment is the other thing. I know that getting a diagnosis in this stage of understanding can be devastating, but we need to live in the moment. We need to live where we are. Diagnosis is not a death sentence. We do know that Alzheimer's disease and related dementia is progressive, but we don't know the progression of that. It is individualized by diagnosis and by the individual. There are tips, and we talk about this on the podcast, tips to living your best life. What does that look like? It may mean that some of the things you're currently doing, some of the hobbies you have, some of the interests you have, some of the things you're responsible for may begin to change at some point during the stages of this disease. But how do you live in the moment? How do you maintain independence? This is really important. We don't want to give up everything. We don't want to assume the worst. In this process, in this stage, we want to maintain our independence as much as possible. We've done podcasts in and around this with people who've been diagnosed, and they do a number of things that help with their prompting and cueing. They get support only in the areas where they need it. That may be driving, it may be cooking, it may be paying bills in the early stages. It really just depends. And that's why it's important in this stage that you get the resources available to evaluate. How independent can you be? How long can you maintain your lifestyle? And for many, that's for a number of years with a lot of cueing and support. They're able to live a best life kind of way. And so I think that this is important. Making a care plan. So in this stage here, in stage 2, let's just talk about that. What do you want for yourself? Where do you want to live? When do you want support to come in? Is this something you want family to care for you? Are you wanting to look at having outside services? And what does that look like? Not only what are you able to afford, but what are the resources in your area? Making some basic plans for your care moving forward comes from understanding your diagnosis and understanding the possible progression. That's not going to come with your diagnosis. That's going to come 6 months, a year later, and then 6 months, a year later after that. This is a process, and a lot of people live very well for many, many years and maintain a lot of independence. So that's individualized. If you're currently a person who is working or has a career, obviously you're going to want to plan for that. And I think of a podcast that we had with a woman named Rita who had early diagnosis, who actually worked for a while and then chose to retire early because she felt it was best for her. So these are the kinds of things that you want to look at. Dementia is not an overnight diagnosis. It doesn't change your life immediately. With the right support, the right treatment, you can really live life well and live in the moment in this stage. Coping is going to be important. This diagnosis could be devastating. Talking about your feelings and what you want to do and what you want to accomplish, whether it's through your spirituality, whether it's through support group or through counseling. It's really important to decide what's important to you at this time. Fear and anxiety. I think fear and anxiety in this stage is very common. And one of the things that's going to make a difference for you is to educate yourself around the diagnosis and the stages. Also educate yourself on the opportunities to live your best life. How do you remain active? How do you keep your mind active? Through socialization, through physical exercise, through doing things to preserve cognitive health. These things are going to be important. It's a discussion you want to have with your closest family. You're going to talk about this care plan, have them help you designate your healthcare surrogate. Again, this is something that as a family, you want to educate not only yourself, but family members need to be a part of that. Dealing with family that is uneducated about dementia and how it works, what are some of the common things, is not going to make for good planning. So the entire family really needs to get involved if they're going to be part of the care planning process. So identifying what are the support options and services in the area where you live. So this is financially identifying what you can afford, but also what are the options for you. There is a gamut of options for support services in and out of your home, as well as some options for a memory care community when it comes to that, when it's time for you to move into a memory care community. What kind of help do you need now? What are home health services and what are the costs? Financial planning is important. Making sure that your healthcare surrogate, that your will and trust are up to date. Having an elder law attorney is advisable, definitely at this stage. What kind of bill paying support and home support do you have? And then what are your insurance options, whether you have private insurance, whether you have Medicare, what are those? And again, taking a look at this process. We do know, again, that this stage is early. Oftentimes there is a perceived stigma in and around this stage, but this is the stage where you as an individual can make a lot of decisions. You can look at options. And I think for a family member like myself, unfortunately, my mom did not make those things known or those decisions. There had been no history of dementia in her family and my family. As she began to develop, as she began to age into her 90s, we could only guess at exactly what she wanted. And I feel like I knew enough just because of my background and profession. But this is something that a lot of families that I find that I deal with and coach, they really don't want to make this decision for their loved ones. And so this is the point where we have those deep conversations in and around in this stage. So this is the second stage in the 4 stages of understanding. I hope that our discussions in and around these stages are valuable to you, that you will use these resources to your advantage. We know that the dementia journey can be a long one. that it's very individualized. I want you to understand the latest research, have access to the latest education, and certainly be involved with others in a support setting that will make a difference. Until next time, this is Dawn Platt. Make it a memorable day.
Thank you for joining us for the Disappearing Mind podcast. We hope it's helped you find clarity and support along your journey. Be sure to subscribe to never miss an episode, visit our website to suggest future topics, and share the podcast with friends and family.